Welcome, mourners, to Sideshow Collectibles' Court of the Dead stream. I am your Arcaneist, Satine Phoenix, here to bring you an amazing interview with these wonderful sculptors, Matt, Molen, and Alfred Paredes. Yay! Thank you guys for coming in. I know you have very busy schedules, but I want to know all about what it takes to bring these beautiful sculptures to life, or even into existence altogether. So, what exactly do you do here? What does sculpting at Sideshow mean?
Start. I am a sculptor. I'm part of the sculpt team. So that's my principal job here and role. I also do a lot of the engineering and fixing and that sort of stuff. So I kind of take on multiple roles. I'm kind of like a MacGyver of sorts here, and so I do that. And I just recently transferred over to digital full time. So I used to be the last of the traditional guys in the building, and now I'm full time into the digital room. So
what is engineering? I mean, I know sculpting, but what is the engineering part of it?
So all our statues, we have to do them in a way that they can come apart for mold and cast and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes it requires very complex ways of cutting and keying them. And they don't always come that way from other sculptors that we use. In-house, all our guys take care of their own engineering, but sometimes we use other guys and they don't exactly do it the way we want, or they don't do it at all, and we have to kind of do it. So I have to go in and cut apart the pieces. I used to do it by hand when I'd get a physical sculpt and I'd have to fix it, which was a lot more scary and risk of breakage. Now I can do it digitally, and if I mess up, I can just go back and Control Z and then just fix it.
Delicious Control Z.
Yeah, and so I can do that, but sometimes I have to go in and literally cut it apart at the seams, add keys, build it all back together again. And so it's a complex thing.
Cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
I started out here as 2D, and then just through different projects, because I just first started with miniatures outside, and then basically came in here, so I learned how to engineer in ZBrush as well. I work digitally. Started in 2D, and just through designing and then sculpting a little bit, and then it just kind of snowballed into now being a sculptor.
That's awesome. They recognized your work and said, come and join us in the sculpt side.
yeah. I haven't made the full jump over, but I'm like a remote. I'm in a remote camp outside the sculpt base.
But that's really cool, because it's not, an artist isn't just an artist in one field. It really takes an understanding of multiple fields in order to do the thing that needs to be created, right?
Oh, for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, speaking of all of that, what are your origin stories? Where did you come from? How do people out there do the things they need to do to become the people that are sitting in these amazing chairs right here?
I was stabbed by a radioactive sculpting tool, and then I gained all of my powers. No. I actually, I thought I was going to be an illustrator when I was younger. That's what I thought I was going to do. I went to college to be an illustrator, and then I got there, and then they were doing, I had to do the fundamentals, oil painting, drawing from life, all that stuff. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. And I was like, versus doing what other people want you to do, I get to just draw and do whatever I want to do. I was like, this is fun. So then I was like, oh, I'll just be a fine artist, and can't really make money at it, but I liked the appeal of doing what I wanted to do. And I was like, oh, this is fun. And then it was end of my sophomore year in college, they brought in a sculpting teacher. And I was like, oh, what's sculpting? I've never sculpted before. And I took that class, signed up for it. And then the very first class, I was like, oh, I don't want to do anything else for the rest of my life. I was like, this is all I want to do. And that was basically it. I fell in love with sculpting, haven't looked back since.
Wow, that's awesome. What size sculptures did you do back then?
At the time, it was life size and over life size.
Whoa!
And then, and then for practice, we would do half life size sculptures. So
this is a lot easier.
When I switched, I lost 10 years in the middle there because work ran out and stuff, and I kind of had to pay bills, and so I went back and did construction and kind of got stuck doing construction for a while. So I lost about 10 years of my artistic progression. Finally was like, I need to get out of that, get back into art. Got back into art and started doing that and tried to find my way into paying gigs. I didn't want to do fine art anymore. And I was like, I got to find some commercial work. And the toy industry and collectible industry really appealed to me. But I had to sort of switch gears and be like, okay, let me go from sculpting heads that are this big, and I got to do heads that are this big. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. And so I had to really quickly learn, and I just put myself through the paces and literally spent 18, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, just locked myself in a room, and it was just like, all right, time to practice. And I would not stop practicing, and over and over and over, and sculpt it and destroy it, sculpt it, destroy it, sculpt it, destroy it, and just keep going through that process until I got better and better.
So you didn't want to destroy it anymore?
No, I still destroy most of it. Yeah,
It's never good.
Yeah, well, it's not even like, I mean, some of it's that it's not good enough, and most of it's just, I don't make most of it to keep it. I just make it to practice and to do it and stuff. I mean, obviously, I don't destroy the Sideshow stuff.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of my personal work, I probably keep maybe a third of what I do personally. The rest I kind of sculpt, I take pictures, and I go, that was good, and then I cut it up and throw it.
And you learn from it. Like,
yeah,
that's
pretty
the
much.
whole thing.
That's the whole thing. It's just all about learning.
Otherwise, you just have a bunch of.
It's a lot of.
You'd have your own collection.
Yes, exactly. And I already have enough of my own work at my house, and so you can't just keep doing that. And but I mean, even like when I was teaching, I would teach my students sculpt it and then tear it apart and take pictures of it. By all means, keep it for your reference, but don't be so precious about it. And then that's what it took to learn, and then making friends in the industry and going like, how do you guys get that texture? And then somebody was like, oh, I use a toothbrush, and I was like, what? A toothbrush? And then you do it, and you're like, man, like the veil of mystery is lifted, and you're like, a toothbrush? Man, I thought you guys were using some weird specialized sculpting tool.
Tool.
They're like, nah, toothbrush. And I was like, all right, you bunch of lamos. I was like, I got this now.
So even though you made the transition to digital, you still sculpt traditionally.
Yeah, I mean, I only moved over to the digital realm, here at Sideshow at least, 2 months ago, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly recent. I mean, I've been practicing it now for maybe about a year and a half, actively practicing it. But it was about 2 months ago when they finally said, all right, you've learned enough, time to leave the traditional stuff and move over here with us full time. And so all of my other duties as well, which was some of the more dirty work, not just sculpting stuff, but a lot of the fixing problems in other people's sculptures and that sort of stuff, that got handed off to other people too. So now I can just focus on sculpting and engineering assists and stuff. But it's a lot more sculpting for me now, which is cool. But it's all digital, which is kind of like I don't know. It's like what's the thing?
Well, you were tactile.
Bittersweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I didn't like losing the traditional stuff, because I think there's something special about it. But for work, being able to move into the digital gives me more opportunities here, and it certainly means that I'll have more opportunities to show off my work, and then I get to join the sculpting, because before I was in my own little office and whatever. Now I'm in the room with the other sculptors, and there's a lot more collaboration, talking and growing from that. And so it's a cool thing. I like that part of it. I just miss the actually touching and feeling the clay. That part's a sad part, but yeah.
Is it faster?
Some of it is. There's some things that digital is very good at. The symmetry, being able to sculpt just one side and it magically just sculpts the other side for you. That's really easy, and it's helpful. There's textures.
Helpful cheating. It's
cheating.
cheating.
It's absolutely cheating. And textures. ZBrush is really great at textures and that kind of stuff. But the rest of it really relies on what you know as a sculptor. If you're not a good sculptor traditionally, you won't be a good sculptor digitally, in my opinion. I think you got to have the mindset of a sculptor, right? The skills translate from one to the other, because it's still form, it's still shapes, it's, you know, you have to know anatomy, and that doesn't change just because now the medium is digital versus, you know, traditional. The anatomy doesn't all of a sudden go like, oh, push the anatomy button.
Anatomy is eternal.
Yeah, exactly. And so you kind of have to carry those skills forward. So there's some places where, yeah, ZBrush has been faster, but I've worked on a couple things in ZBrush, and maybe because it's newer to me. I'm not like these other guys have been doing it for, you know, over a decade or whatever. But I've done a couple projects digitally that I was just like, I could have done this so much faster by hand and probably better by hand. Like, it's just, there's certain things that I still feel like I can knock out of the park very quickly and easier by hand versus digital. But the more I practice, the better I get. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's a hell of an origin story. Thank you. All right. Where did you come from?
Artistically, I started it's the weirdest thing, but in Afghanistan when I was in the army. And so I started drawing there. During that time I was having a lot of weird dreams, and I could draw a little bit in like high school and stuff, but it was there I started drawing. And then from there, it was like I had basically the last year of my tour. I was out right after I got out of the army, after that year. And while I was driving home, like I don't know, it's like the void. Like I was driving home, I didn't know what I was gonna do. So I left the base and I was just driving cross country from North Carolina to wherever.
As you do.
And so I was driving, I'm like, what do I want to do? I was like, well, I liked drawing in Afghanistan in high school. All right, I'm an artist now. And then it's like, where do I want to live? Because you can live anywhere, because I get certain things out of the military. And so I was like, California was sunny. I like California. It's better. It was not as cold as North Idaho. So all of a sudden, I'm an artist in California.
Well,
so that is how the void answered my life question. And from there, it was just like a straight, like laser focus, because I got out at 23, 25, I don't know. Anyways, older, like it's the party time is gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I pretty much was just like laser focused. Everything was just to get better. It's the same thing. It was like, I went up north into Humboldt, and I remember it was some of the best times of my life was literally sitting in the library. It's on the 3rd floor, and it was just the art section, and I would just get a bunch of books like from anywhere. It would be like Roman sculpture, Japanese traditional, like parades. And then I would get like a book on photography, like old black and white photography, and I would just lay them out and like skip through them. So the actual imagery I wasn't copying, it was the imprint of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so then through there, I started drawing, and that, like, if you look at my drawings, they're really light. It's because the way I learned my value scale was through old black and white photos, like the old like generals. It's because, and so that's why it's always light. And I have to, now I've learned how to get darker, but before it was super light because of that. Yeah. And from there, graduated. I was like, I'm a fine artist. And I was like, the same thing, like, I can't make any money. And so then
it's the brutal realization that they don't tell you in school.
No.
So then I learned ZBrush, and then...
It's kind of a jump. Just saying, like, what led you to choosing that format after absorbing so much old-fashioned art?
It was because, just like me remembering I had fun drawing in high school, I actually took a sculpture class too, and I was like, wait, I remember that was fun too. So let me try that. And so then once again, it was just laser focused. The teachers were like, because I was like learning like all the 3, like Maya and stuff, and I was so raging at that silent rage computer while everybody else is like, yeah, look at this cool render. I'm like, I can't model. So the teachers were like, just stick to ZBrush, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And so then from then on, went home, graduated, went home, and I actually started sculpting digitally for miniatures.
Ah.
And so I did a bunch of freelance gigs for a bunch of guys, a bunch of startups for Kickstarter. And then from there, just like I said, it's like 3D drawing. I never stopped. It was both of those. And from there, I got a random job doing like the cups for, like, you know, you got like your Mickey Mouse cup that's actually sculpted, like the Star Wars sculpts you see in Walmart.
Yeah.
I'm that guy.
Nice.
And so then from there, it was like, because of the manufacturing, it, like, I would sculpt it to a detail level that I wanted it at, but then when I would go over there and check it out, it wouldn't be up to par. So I wanted to find a place, Sideshow, that could then, like, I would have to go to their level, like raise, like I'd be challenged. It wouldn't just be me like, I'm sculpting Mickey Mouse heads again today. Let's watch his face get melted and come back over from overseas. And so that was basically it. And then from here, I was doing 2D, and then it started doing designing bases, then it became sculpting bases, then sculpting miniatures, to just bigger and bigger things.
Wow, that's awesome. Two totally different paths, but I think what I'm hearing is that laser focus and obsession to go beyond the artistic, no, you can't make money making art, all the way to, we're working at Sideshow, one of the coolest places ever. So what is it like working here? What is the process of creating some of these beautiful sculptures that looks like it takes 20,000 hours to make?
It's very collaborative, that's for sure. Like, that's the first thing, is that it's very collaborative. Like
100%.
there's no statue, there's no anything that comes through here that is a, you know, like Matt Molen.
Yeah.
Like no
Yeah.
other credit. You know, Alfred Paredes, no other credit. Like there is none of that. It's constantly going from design to sculpt, back to design sometimes. Then we, you know, painters and the fabric guys and like just everybody. It's such a collaborative effort to get any of this out. And then all the people behind the scenes, the project managers and the people that are actually guiding the whole thing through. There's no way to get any of these statues out without a team effort. So it really is super collaborative in that sense.
Being open-minded as well.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
those
Yeah.
to those things. Like
Yeah.
somebody will just come by and be like, you know, they might just throw that idea, but that idea will then manifest itself in a weird way that you can then put it into the project and make it work.
Yeah, there's a balance between taking ownership of work, which I mean they kind of encourage you to do here, but not being possessive of the work,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like kind of saying like, yes, this is my project and I'm gonna put myself into this and do my thing. But when you have people saying, hey, we'd like to see this change or we'd like to do that, not always fighting it. I mean, if there's good reasons to stand up for what you want, then obviously do that. But a lot of times just going like, oh, okay, yeah, let's listen to other people's ideas, because in a vacuum, you can't create a lot of great stuff.
And on top of that, it's like, you know, here at Sideshow, it's like you can walk next door and it's like world-class people. Like they know what they're talking about, you know? And I'm like, no, I just, you know, I know better. It's like, no, dude, no, you don't. You do not.
Yeah, we're surrounded by some of the best in the industry, so it's important to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you learn.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't be where I was if it wasn't for so many other people that were kind enough to share their knowledge.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's a really good lesson for artists to learn.
Yeah. No, I get too many of those because I get maybe 2-3 emails a month from younger kids that are like, what can I do? Or, you know, will you critique my work or do whatever? And I'm always open to doing that because I had those opportunities with really amazing industry professionals who were open to do that for me. And so I was like, I feel kind of an obligation to make sure I sort of, you know, pay that forward. And so when they reach out to me and I say, all right, well, this is what you need to do. And this is, you know, buckle down here, or you should change this, adjust this, blah, blah, blah. And then you see the ones who absorb it and go, thank you so much. Yes, I'm going to do that. And then you see the ones that are like, well, you know, like I kind of thought that I like this part, and I kind of like the way that looks. I'm kind of going to leave that, and it's like, okay. Well,
You're the
Exactly.
artist.
good luck with that then. You know, thanks
Yeah.
for reaching out, and good luck, and I hope you do well. But it's that thing. If you're not open to it, you're not going to learn. You're not going to get anywhere. You know, it's I'm sure I annoy the guys to some degree, but I drag them over to my workstation and just say, "Will you look at this, please, and just give me some eyeballs?" Because I can look at it and say, I think it's going in the right direction. But if I can get a couple of these other guys to come in and look at it and kind of go, "Oh yeah," or "Have you thought of this?" Like,
You're almost waiting
like,
for
just
that.
Brilliant. Like, yeah, but it's like the littlest thing. Sometimes you just don't see it because you're so close to it.
Yeah.
That being able to bring in those outside influences and just say, hey, like, you know, just take a peek and, you know, let me know if this is going in the right way. But it's one of the benefits of being surrounded by world-class, you know, people, and at all levels. It's not just me talking to the sculptors about it. It's me talking to design or some of the other ones, or just PMs or fans of the work, people that are in administration levels, but they're fans of the stuff. Like, you like so-and-so, right? Like, I'm working on this. Like, what do you think? And they're like, oh, you know what would be really cool? And just taking that information. So, like I said, collaborative on all levels. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. They bring you art and say, make it come to life. How do you do it?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It's
a slog at first.
I don't know that. I mean, it never really starts the same way.
Court of the Dead.
Yeah, Court of the Dead.
How did you bring Court of the Dead to life?
So I mean, it depends what they bring you. So like the stuff I've sculpted with like the apple or like the Kier mask and things like that, where we had ideas, like the Kier mask, we already knew what we wanted because we've seen the Kier mask. Now we just wanted to make a life-size version of the Kier mask and take it up a notch. And so for that, it's really like take this and sort of make it bigger and better, right? So like there's parameters and you kind of know how to do that. And that was all sculpted traditionally. So I did that by hand over a life cast, and I just kind of sculpted a whole thing in wax and brought in real horns because it has the big horns. And so I had like actual reference of horns and things and bone. I have a big bone collection. And so I had all these bones and stuff so I could just get all these textures in. And everything was done by hand. Every little mark on there is done individually by me. And so that one took a lot of work, but I had a point of reference. With things like the apple, it was more of like, here's an idea. You know, would you be interested in doing this? You know, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like fun. And then I just started designing in small scale. So like artists, like 2D artists will thumbnail out ideas. Mm-hmm. I did the same thing sculpturally, where I was doing small versions, little, you know, 1 inch, 2 inch, little mini apples, but very loose, just really, really loose, just to kind of get silhouettes and ideas and, you know.
What do you use?
I was using wax,
okay.
A sculptural wax. So I could, you know, you warm it up and it kind of sculpts like clay, but then when it cools down, it's hard. So then it stays, and I'm not going to worry about bumping it or destroying it if I drop it or anything. And I would sketch those out, and then we would just kind of go through and go, all right, not this, not this, not this, like kind of like this, kind of like that, maybe somewhere in between, and just sort of dialed it in until I got to an apple that we were like, that's the one.
I had no idea that there was
make it
sculpt sketching.
Oh yeah, that's how I do. Actually, that guy, Mr. Malavestros, thank you. He started off as, you know, a 2D illustration, but we were having a hard time getting some of the gesture in the 2D art before it went to full sculpt. And that's where they asked me, because part of what I was doing here before was also sort of these exploratory sketches. Mm-hmm. So kind of like, you know, like doing thumbnails for drawings, I was doing clay sketches to work out these ideas. So I did a version of that one in clay very quickly and just kind of was able to lay out what this thing was going to look like in the round. And then that went back to design, and they were able to use that and then actually see it and draw from there, and then take the design further to its final stage. And then it went off to the final sculpture.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. But again, right, that collaborative thing, back and forth and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, starting with sketching, like, in clay, loose stuff. And then that's how you get it. And then other stuff, like I said, like the cure mask, which is, I have reference. You don't need to sketch out anything. We already know what it looks like in the small scale version. Now just make it full scale and really make it badass.
So with ZBrush, you both use ZBrush.
Yeah.
How is it different now that you're usually mostly using the computer?
Right. I mean, it is for me, because going from clay, I had to have armatures and things. Like I literally had to build it in wires and whatnot and build it up physically. Now it's I still tend to start from a sphere. I know lots of guys use bucks and bodies and stuff, and they just sort of adjust and pull. I'm still sort of going like, I'll just start with this blob and just stretch it until it turns into the thing I like. Which is probably not the best way. I don't know, but
it's not
it's not the fastest way.
But it's the proper, like, because then you're like, all right, now let me get this shoulder correct.
Yeah.
So
versus using a model that's already sort of existing and just tweaking it, I'm literally starting from a ball and working it that way. But
editing, ZBrush it really helps with editing.
Yeah,
and especially here, it's like, you know the pain of this, where it's like, oh, instead of making the arm like this, can we bring it back? And so then all of a sudden it's like, well, let me cut this, and
yeah, there's a lot of that stuff.
Key it in, where in ZBrush you just pretty much mask it. And
oh wow, so you puppetry it. And
yeah,
you can
essentially,
it.
yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
just sculpt the form
changes
over.
traditionally used to be really hard, which is, it sort of forced us to really get our designs nailed in early, and now we can have a design, but then still explore sculpturally, because we can make those changes easier in ZBrush than we could traditionally.
How does that affect the pose and the statue in the long run? Do you find that you can kind of have an oversight and it becomes more fluid and organic in its motion?
I think that's
or is that like
based
something...
on the individual sculptor? I think. They'll find that, and it's, for me, it's the still getting used to the translation of sort of artificial perspective, right? Because it's 3D but on a 2D surface, right? The computer's still flat, but there's a perception of three-dimensional space on a sculpture. But I'm used to seeing it stereoscopically, and being able to move it and move around it, and it looks very different. And then in ZBrush, still getting used to like, well, let me turn it, let me shrink it. Like before I step away from my sculpture, here I have to take the sculpture and push it away digitally, right? So I can see it smaller and kind of see its overall shape, like you said, the flow of the forms and stuff. Where I think one of the traps of ZBrush is that it sort of wants you to sort of stay zoomed in and just kind of let me just keep working away, and you really have
That's an artist trap no matter what medium you're in.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
There's also the
you have to break yourself of it.
The tricky puzzle of where's the center of gravity, where's the center mass of this thing. So if you have a guy like really jumping forward, like how much, like if he keys in one way, how much do you need to make this, like how beefy you need to make it to make him like straight or something, so he's not like, keyed into a weak spot where
and then the whole thing tips over.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, there's no gravity button in ZBrush yet, where you just hit gravity and watch your whole sculpture fall over, like, oh, I need a bigger base, or I need to stand them up more vertically.
Wow, so you really have to think about all those things while you're sculpting.
Yeah.
Like
and especially digitally, because traditionally the thing was, if you don't sculpt it right, it's gonna fall over.
Yeah.
It's just you have no choice but to sculpt it right. If you're going to key something in, it can only fit and it can't be locked into place. Digitally, things can be locked into place because the way they're sculpted, things can overlap and they can still exist in the digital world, even though they're overlapping. Traditionally, they can't do that. And so it's knowing those things and like, how is this going to fit? Like, is it going to lock into this thing? And being aware of those things. You have to be a lot more aware of what you're doing in ZBrush, because if you're not, then we get the printed piece and it's like, well, this thing won't go together.
This armor is going into the
it's
arm
going
for no
into
reason.
it's going into the body. Or like Matt said, we try to put it together and the whole thing just falls over.
Has that happened?
Yeah, we've had some that have
Yeah.
like just like, well, that was leaning a little too much, and then we make adjustments, and we have to adjust the base, or we readjust the figure, whatever it is, and we go back and we re-engineer it. We don't send them out that way, but we have had some that have come back like, oh yeah, we didn't catch that, and like, but
that's how you learn.
That's how you
right?
learn, and it's tricky. We're certainly better at it, and we haven't made nearly as many of those mistakes now that we've been doing ZBrush here more and more. I mean, we're like 98% digital now. There's still a few traditional ones. But
It's kind of awesome actually seeing like the PMs like work around like a problem, like, you know, doing their magic to make it work. And so you're like, you know, half the stuff they do, I can't even tell. Like, oh yeah, because of this. I'm like, oh, that's
PM's
awesome.
project manager.
Project manager.
Okay.
Am I right with that though? It's like a PM that does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll figure it out and or just kind of steer the thing. Sometimes the sculptors have an idea. We'll try to point out stuff. And,
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Court of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of beautiful pieces, and they're totally different. You've got the factions that are different. You're using different kinds of plastics, different opacities. What is the process of building something like that? Of anything in Court of the Dead?
Wow. Well, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of that has to, I'd say it starts at, you know, Tom's vision. Tom has a very specific vision for the Court of the Dead. And so that's kind of where everything gets funneled through. And as you start there and we're working with the stuff, as we sculpt it, we're kind of aware of what the end goal is. So it's like, oh, well, this is a ghostly figure. So we know this is going to be cast in a translucent material and it's going to have this. So that affects even like the engineering of it. Like you can't have big fat keys that are going into it because if it's translucent, you can see inside of it. You can see the keys and stuff. So being aware of the materials that it's going to be and that sort of stuff, the end goal for it affects everything all the way down to how we build it. And then, you know, then it goes into mold and cast, and then the various materials get used, and then the painters do their amazing job at it. And it's it's a very long process, but all of it starts with that vision, that original vision of what this thing is going to be, and then
design,
and then
just
design.
talking with design, and Tom, and then design, and then design, and then sculpting, and then it just starts
paint and Tom and along every stage, and then some of them with fabric and all the other stuff. I mean, we've got to know how that's going to work into it because some of them have capes and other, you know.
Oh, so you have to consider that when you're sculpting as well.
Yeah, we have to have allowances for how it's going to fit, where it's going to fit, knowing how it's going to flow, if it's going to block something. Do we need to know, don't sculpt here kind of thing? It's a lot of things to take into mind.
There's a lot going on behind us. What did you guys work on here?
All right, let's see. So starting with our man Death over there, I sculpted the mask that he's wearing, and then that creepy soul base that he's standing on.
Yeah, it's super creepy.
That was before I was actually hired here full time. So I was in here as a freelancer sculpting, and that was sort of my first in-house project. They were like, "We need to get this to Comic-Con. You need to sculpt this in about a week. So get going." And I was like, okay, sounds good. Let's see if I don't get fired immediately. And then I sculpted that thing, and then the mask came later. He had a different mask at one point. And then we switched
It's hiding in the back over here.
And then we switched it to that mask, yeah. And then so I sculpted that small scale, and that one was done traditionally. And then our man here, I did the concept design. Like I said, I did that clay sketch for it, and then I've done some tweaking here and there on the final piece. I did, you know, little engineering bits and adding some stitches and various things around the face that weren't there. Just
really cool
little
details
tweaks.
on them.
Oh man, that one's amazing. There's so much to actually go in, and the story that's being told in the scroll and stuff. That's always fun. This chick, I did engineering. Gethsemane was like just engineering stuff. I remember trying to figure out how to make her all the stuff in her hand work and other things.
Let's look at her. I'm going to pull her out so we can look at her and play with her. All right. Yeah. So this is so intricate. And
yeah.
So do you know how many pieces?
That was, I think, at least 2, and if I remember correctly, it was 3 when we tried to put it together. And then after we got it all assembled, mold and cast and everything, they sort of did it as one piece so that it could go off to engineering. But the original thing was actually multiple pieces, had other little strands coming off. Yeah, it was a complicated one. And then this lower one, big swirly thing down here. But this was one that was masterfully sculpted by Mark Newman. This was his baby.
Cool. And then you guys together go back and forth on, like, you were talking about the hand positions. This one specifically I like because, you know, the focus is right here, but then there's this beautiful nuance of her about to touch her dagger.
Yeah, that's all in design, and then, you know, like the great eyes of some of our sculptors, and just knowing gesture, and, you know, that a sculpt isn't just a one view kind of thing, right? Sculpture's in the round, so it needs to look good from every angle and tell a good story. So finding all those little elements and knowing that you can't just have like here's all this action, but this hand's just limp over here.
No lazy hands.
Yeah, exactly. No lazy hands. Even fingers.
It's art school 101.
Fingers need to be doing stuff, right? Just like this sort of thing is boring. If you do that, now it's cool.
Yeah, show personality through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
movement.
so much personality and movement in all of these.
Yeah.
How do you pay attention to all of it? I mean, even to the point of the shadows that are cast from her crown onto her, like the back of her head. Everything looks so deliberate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that starts with good design. That's what that's where
great execution.
Yeah, good design, and then
Do you find that you're able? No, that's not the question. Are you surprised by some of the changes you have to make from when you're trying to interpret a 2D piece into 3D?
Yeah, no, 2D into 3D always has its issues. There's when we deal with 2D to 3D, there's always stuff you just can't always see it, and even some of the best designers can't always know what this thing is in a complete turnaround.
Exactly. The pelvis might work in this 2D really good in this foreshortened view, but also when you're trying like this, you're like, whoa, this
now it doesn't.
Where is this half of this body at?
Yeah, so there's a lot of problem solving to then capture the essence of the design, but make it make sense in 3-dimensional form. And so luckily with the Court of the Dead, it's our own IP, and we can adjust ourselves and stuff. Where other times when we work with artist-specific pieces, where this is the art that it has to match, and then you go to sculpt it and you're like, it won't look like that because I can't make the body do what it does in the picture and still look the same this way. That's a little trickier. With the Court, because it's our own stuff, we can go back and forth and design, and then go to sculpt, and then sculpt back to design, and keep sort of looking for those best angles and the best ways to adjust the pose and stuff.
Yeah, and it is your IP. So, is there a freedom that you have that you don't have in other ones, or?
Yeah, I think so.
100%.
Yeah, there's a lot more chance to explore and take chances and
affect. To affect it could a good idea or pose or just anything can affect the whole trajectory of where the sculpt ends up, and that's why these turn out so well. It's like the same with collaboration. It's like someone might say something like, "That's a good idea. We're going with that," and now it elevates it rather than just that.
Yeah, and because it's ours, we can take our time and get it just right, and so we're not sort of beholden to schedules or things like that. I mean, we have certain internal schedules for sure, but we can, because it's ours, we can kind of say, all right, let's make sure we're getting it right, and let's make sure this is just the way we want it, and let's take our time to do that. And like Matt said, that's why they turn out so well, is because they do get a little bit extra time.
Cool. What is your favorite one to work on? What has been your favorite one to work on? Or even a piece of one?
What I'm working on now. But I can't tell you.
You tease. Yeah, Cleopsis's face, I think, was one of the ones. I just did the face. Mark Newman did the whole figure. But the original concept for the face changed after he had already completed the sculpture.
Oh, wow.
And so we needed a new version of the face. And they asked me if I would do it. And it was a fun challenge to sort of have it be my work, but still fit with Mark's sculpture. You know, not feel out of place. Like, oh, here's the sculpture, and then here's this completely different style face.
Yeah.
And so that one was a fun challenge, even though it's just the face by itself is all I sculpted. But that one was a really fun one, and I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out as well.
Cool.
And then the apple was a lot of fun because I got to just
so cute.
I got to
Look
just
at
kind
that
of do my
face.
thing and explore and have fun with that thing, and it turned out to be extremely popular, which was really funny to see the reaction of fans when they got to see it, and then immediately go, "Can I get one?" And we were like, "Well, we weren't planning on selling these," and then eventually we're like, "We're planning on
Here
selling
you go.
these," and
There's
then they
one.
immediately sold out, which was a lot of fun.
Also, this is one of my favorite kinds of apples. It's
Ah.
the ones that are kind of the yellow and
A little
or the-
multicolored
Yeah,
ones,
yeah,
yeah.
sweet but tart. So that's really fun. Okay, I want to know how hard it is. No, I want to know the differences between sculpting something like this and something this size. Yeah, pull her down because both of them are these gorgeous, epic positions. And also, my faction is flesh.
Oh, nice.
So I like to talk about her a lot. Yeah, what are the different challenges?
Well, materials. I mean, this Gethsemane was done traditionally. So originally, this was done all by hand.
Oh, wow.
I think the base was maybe digital, but she was done traditionally. So if you were going to do that and then shrink her down to this size and do that traditionally, that would be a bit of a challenge because you have to take all of that same sort of level of detail, make it smaller. Digitally, I think we don't really have a limitation because we can print it whatever size we want.
Yep.
Really.
That's one thing I touched on. Like there were a couple of things that we wanted to tweak in-house with the smaller Gethsemane, and so that was just something I messed with. And like you said, it's when you get digital, then all of a sudden you can just keep printing it out and like, all right, that looks good, and you turn it, that looks great, or make it a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, so no one has to resculpt anything. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a huge benefit of the digital is that it allows us to take the same work, and if we wanted to kind of go, okay, well, let's sculpt it or let's print this out at this scale or let's try it out at a larger scale, and then really the only thing is understanding what its ultimate end goal is going to be. If it's going to be something this size, we really can't pack it with an abundance of detail, because then it just sort of muddies the thing at that scale. But as we go bigger, now we need to consider, okay, now we need to sort of add a lot more surface detail and textures, because it is going to be bigger, and paint is going to need to sort of get into these areas. So there's things to consider, even if we do it digitally, knowing the scale that we're going to ultimately print it, because if it's smaller, we can keep it simple. If we need to go bigger, then we need to say, all right, now we need to sort of pack on a lot more information.
Cool. I have a final question for you. What faction are you guys? There's flesh, bone, and
I landed
spirit.
in flesh when I did my
Really?
thing. Yep, that was mine.
I would be spirit, but wanting to be bone. So
That's really funny because I would have said sculpture, bone. But yeah, that's really fascinating. Thank you guys so much for being here and
absolutely.
discussing your world with us. I wish we could talk about the things that you're working on, but I know we can't.
Nope.
Unfortunately.
Why don't you, okay, if there was a piece of advice that you were going to give people that are watching, that want to be sculptors, that want to work for awesome companies like Sideshow Collectibles, what would you tell them?
I'd say one of the probably most important things is practice, never stop, right? Just keep creating, and then being honest with yourself, taking an honest look at your work, look at the work that's being created, whether it's here at Sideshow or whatever company you want to work for. If you want to come to Sideshow, it's important to look at the work we're doing and take an honest look at what you're doing and say, yes, I'm at that level, I can go apply, or I have a lot of work to do.
Because you will be tested on it.
Oh yeah. I mean, the second you get here, you'll know it's like you don't have what it takes, and it's unfortunate, and we wish you the best. But if you're not at this level, you can't play at this league. You got to move down to the minors or whatever. But a lot of times we get caught up in, yeah, that's an awesome job. Wouldn't it be so cool to work at Sideshow? But we forget you need to be at a certain level to work here. And it's a very privileged opportunity and a privileged few who get to actually make it. But it doesn't say that other people can't make it. There's absolutely opportunity for people to get there. You just need to be, good enough to get to that level. And some of it just requires honesty, like looking at your work and saying, yeah, I can do this, and going after it. Or I can't do this yet, but I will get there, right? And I was doing silly stuff when I first started. When I quit construction and I was doing stuff, there was no way I could work for Sideshow, but it was the goal, right? And I was like, I'll get there eventually, and I did. It took my goal was to be there in 5 years. It took me 7.
Oh, so, that's cool.
But I got there.
Don't
eventually.
give up. Okay,
Yeah,
follow-up question for you. There are people that are really good, but they have that thing called imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
Like,
I get that. I get that all the time. So it's, I think as artists, we deal with that regularly. It's not an isolated thing, and doesn't only belong to the talentless or whatever. The most talented people I know have moments of self-doubt, and I certainly battle with it every once in a while. My most recent one was probably about 5 months ago, where it came up, and I really just felt like everything I was making was terrible. I didn't belong here, and that I was immediately going to be found out to be a fraud, and I was going to be fired.
Pitchforks were coming out.
Oh, yeah.
We have them in the closet, just ready for that.
I was waiting for Tom to tap me on the shoulder and just say, "Get out!" And you just have to understand that it happens to all of us, and it doesn't mean you're not good. It just means you're holding yourself to a higher standard, which is a good thing. It sucks that it manifests itself in doubt, but the reason for it is because you want to be better. I think, and that's the driving force of it. And if you can sort of remember that and bring it back to, okay, yeah, this is how I feel right now, but if I can just keep positive and keep pushing, right? Don't stop making this stuff. Like, even when I was dealing with it a few months ago, I didn't stop working. I didn't go, all right, I'll be back when this goes away or whatever. It's just, I'm just going to work, and I'm going to doubt what I'm doing, and maybe I'm going to ask the people around me a little more than I would normally to come look at what I'm doing, and like, hey, does this look right and stuff? And then them going, yeah, just stop it. Like, it's fine, keep going. Like, but you get past it eventually, and don't hate yourself for not doing that, and don't compare yourself too much. I mean, like, in a sense, I mean, I know I just said with the other advice, compare your work to others. But
it's creative competition,
but,
not like
but not
me versus you.
Exactly, right? Because I'm in a room with like literally some of the best people in the industry, right? And if I were to go look around there and look at myself, I would pack my stuff and leave. But knowing that we all bring a different skill set, and some of the stuff that I do is stuff that they look at and go, oh, that's really cool. Then we're all kind of, in that same place. Just there are those that we look at, and for whatever reason, we admire what they do specifically, and we go, wow, I'm never going to be like that. Why am I even here? Kind of stuff. But instead of doing that, saying like, how do I learn from that? And how can I be better and try to get to that point? Maybe if I never do, but if I try to get there, then that's enough of a driving force to, pay off in the end, really.
Constantly observe.
Yeah.
That's it. Just constantly observe what everybody is doing, figure out why it works, and go to Comic-Con and cons and meet the actual artists face to face. That's what I would say to people. Like when you get to meet them face to face, like
build relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to be like, yo, your work's awesome on Facebook, but another thing to literally be like, you're awesome, and they'll be like, thank you, but then you can come the next time, and eventually you'll be able to talk with them as like a regular person rather than like, oh,
You're amazing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because the truth is we're all human and we all learn, and if you're an artist, if you put in those 10,000 hours, you too can sculpt something as amazing. Well, this maybe is like, this is what, a few different people, so this is like 50,000 hours.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cool. Thank you guys so much for being here and
Thanks.
sharing your brains with all of us. Matt Molen
Yes.
and Alfred Paredes.
There you go.
I did it. And thank you, mourners, for watching yet another super fun interview from Sideshow Collectibles, Court of the Dead stream. I'm Satine Phoenix, your Arcaneist, and we'll see you again. And remember, rise, conquer, rule.
Hey, did you like that video? Be sure to subscribe by clicking the S icon on your screen and click that bell icon to be notified whenever a new video is posted. If you'd like more info on the items featured in this video, click the link provided under Product Info. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to let your geek side show.